Hello, you are on the Ruslan Belov channel, and today we'll discuss the situation in Ukraine as of June 23, 2025. A lot has happened today, so let's get started. We will cover the strikes on training camps located in Sumy region and in southern Ukraine, and then go over the situation along the line of contact. According to incoming reports, it seems that the Russian army has moved to the final stage of cutting off the pocket located south of the Klebenbeek reservoir. Throughout the day, strikes were carried out on training camps, and the first scandals have already begun in Ukrainian sources among various agencies. In these footage, we can observe the first strike on a Ukrainian training center, located just south of the city of Sumy. As we can see, this camp was hit multiple times by Iskander missiles. The first strike landed right on target. Just seconds later, a second strike hit the same location, possibly targeting vehicles, evacuation transports, or warehouses. This strike was geolocated, and Russian systems were confirmed to have hit exactly this point. Further south, in Mykolaiv region, near the settlement of Davydiv Brid, another strike took place. This time, the footage is of better quality, clearly showing specific positions of the Ukrainian armed forces and a large number of vehicles. Most importantly, the footage shows the formation of Ukrainian troops. Here's the first recorded formation, vehicles arriving, possibly for preparation. Here's another site, maybe a small HQ. Another formation is seen in the south. This indicates a significant Ukrainian presence, likely training to become drone operators. A strike was carried out on these positions, apparently using a Tornado S system with cluster munitions. According to Russian sources, the Ukrainian forces lost up to 11 vehicles and 75 personnel killed or wounded. A highly effective strike, as we can see. Now let's move to the front line. We have some very interesting updates, starting with the Sumy section. According to Russian sources, the Russian armed forces continue their offensive. Fierce fighting is ongoing in the area of Unakivka. The Seva, North Troop Group, reports that Ukrainian forces are pouring in reinforcements non-stop. It's clear the Ukrainians don't intend to give up the village without a fight. The battle is already for the central and possibly northern part of the settlement. Despite map updates by different cartographers, there's still no geolocated evidence of a stable Russian presence in any part of Unakivka. Fighting continues. Let me remind you that yesterday we discussed how Ukrainian forces launched a counterattack toward Andriivka after regrouping. More and more footage confirms that Ukraine has regained control over this small village along the Kondrativka-Andriivka-Alexeyevka line. This information was once again confirmed today by neutral mappers. Yesterday it was backed by multiple sources. For instance, the pro-Ukrainian mapping service Deep State reported Ukrainian control over Andriivka. Also published was verified footage showing at least 12 Russian soldiers captured by Ukrainian forces in the northern part of the settlement. Meanwhile, pro-Russian sources published footage showing FPV drone strikes on Ukrainian vehicles in Andriivka, both in the southern and central parts. Over the past 24 to 48 hours, sufficient evidence has been published to indicate that Andriivka is either firmly under Ukrainian control or partly controlled, with the rest in a contested grey zone, vulnerable to fire from both sides. At the same time, the Russian army doesn't seem to be advancing further south, at least in this area. For now, Russian troops have focused on the forested area south of Novokonstantinivka. More and more footage is emerging from that sector. Today again, an air-dropped FAB bomb strike on Ukrainian positions in that forest. A very powerful strike. Given the intensity of these strikes, it appears that the Russian army is planning to move in that direction, not deeper south toward the second Ukrainian defense line near Sumy, but into the forest to expand control along the state border. Possibly Russian forces may later move further towards Stepny and Yastrubin to advance along the border without entering deep into Sumy region itself. Let's now move to the Kupiansk sector. There are no changes in the northern Kupiansk direction, but in the southern Kupiansk or Lyman direction, we have important updates. Yesterday, the Russian Ministry of Defense reported the complete clearing of the settlement formerly known as Petrovskoye, now called Hrekivka by the Ukrainian side. This settlement came under Russian control. We updated the maps accordingly yesterday. Today, sources affiliated with the Russian Ministry of Defense published verified footage showing not just fighting or advances, but also the Russian flag clearly placed in the northern part of Kharkivka. In this footage, we can see Russian soldiers holding the flag in that exact area. Based on this footage, we can finalize the map update and mark Kharkivka under full Russian control. This likely marks the beginning of a new Russian offensive toward Druzhlyubivka. Yesterday, some mappers and analysts also noted Russian advances near Novyi Mir, so we now see two possible vectors, one from the southeast toward Druzhlyubivka and another from the south and southwest. In the near future, there may be attempts to align the front line and capture key strongpoints between Novyi Mir, Andriivka, Olhivka, Druzhlyubivka, and of course Kharkivka. As for the direction toward Lyman, for weeks we have seen little from this area. The last major report was that Russian forces encircled the settlement of Zelenaya Dolina. However, the Ukrainians continue to fiercely resist, preventing a full clearing of the area. Now we move to the Siversky Front. The most important recent news is that Russian troops have entered the village of Serebryanka. Not just entered, the Ukrainian command clearly understands that Serebryanka is a gateway to Sievierodonetsk. As a result, Ukraine is sending wave after wave of reinforcements to expel Russian troops from the northeast part of the village. Intense battles are ongoing for that foothold. Ukrainian forces are counterattacking with infantry and drones, and reinforcements keep arriving. We know that most recent strikes were from the southwest, but today reports indicate that Ukrainian units tried to infiltrate the northeastern part of Serebryanka from the north and northeast by crossing the Siversky Donets River, essentially trying to flank the Russian troops. But Russian reconnaissance detected the Ukrainian movements in time, and artillery strikes were launched against that sector. The Russians still hold their bridgehead in the northeastern part of Serebryanka, but there is no news yet about any further expansion. Now let's go to the Kostiantynivka front, where some of the fiercest fighting is taking place, particularly along the line of Yablunivka, Oleksandro-Kalinove, Katerinivka, Kleban-Byk, and Shcherbinivka, all south or directly south of the Kleban-Byk reservoir. According to various maps and military analysts, Russian forces yesterday succeeded in cutting this area into two segments. This is the map we saw as of the evening of June 21, 2025. This area south of the Kleban-Byk reservoir and south of highways N20 and N32 used to be a unified defense line. But by the evening of June 22nd, reports came in that Russian forces advanced along the N20 highway into the central and eastern part of Oleksandro-Kalinov and reached the southwest edge of the Kleban-Byk reservoir. As a result, the Russian army managed to effectively split this defense area into two sectors. Currently, Russian troops are trying to deal separately with the Yablunivka-Oleksandro-Kalinove axis and separately with the Ukrainian units positioned along the Kryvyi Torets River and the railway line between Novorodske and Kostiantynivka. If we're talking about Yablunivka, then here the Russian army has launched a decisive offensive into the western and northwestern parts. Fighting is underway for all these strongpoints. Drones are operating extensively in the area, effectively blanketing the entire terrain and preventing Ukrainian units from even moving. At the same time, Russian troops are steadily advancing along the tree lines and on the western outskirts toward the central part of Yablunivka. Certain pro-Ukrainian experts with knowledge of the situation on the ground report that by the evening of June 23rd, the Russian army had taken control of approximately 50% of Yablunivka. If we rely on the assessments published by some pro-Ukrainian cartographers and analysts, then the territories already within this red line are under full control of the Russian armed forces, and the Russian army is continuing to push eastward into the central and eastern parts of the settlement. However, as of now, these remain only statements without confirmed geolocation evidence. Speaking of the eastern outskirts, specifically the eastern part of the Kleban-Byk pocket and reservoir, today brought significant map updates, particularly in the northern part of the settlement of Shcherbinivka. Let's look at the map to visualize the changes. As recently as yesterday, the front line in this area looked like this. The settlements of Novospaska, Shcherbinivka, then Katerinivka and Kleban-Byk were firmly under Ukrainian control. But today, new information has emerged, including verified footage, showing that Russian forces have managed to advance from the northwestern part of Toretsk through fields and forest strips, apparently gaining a foothold in the northern part of Sherbinivka. This effectively created a small encirclement of Ukrainian forces currently located in the southern and central parts of Sherbinivka, in the area between Toretsk, Novorodske, Nelipivka, and others. For the Ukrainian units inside this pocket, the situation has become critical. If, in the coming days, the Russian army is not driven out of northern Sherbinivka, then Ukrainian troops may soon begin a retreat along the Kryvyi Torets River in an effort to shorten the front line and avoid encirclement. Today, Ukrainian sources published these verification videos: artillery strikes, mortar fire, drone strikes in various parts of Ukraine. These particular episodes are from the Sherbinivka area. We now have unmistakable footage, possibly even including assault troops, showing Russian troop movement in this sector. Several episodes have been geolocated. This is not just a random strike on an empty building, where, according to the video's author, Russian troops were allegedly located, even though they are not visible or heard. These new videos clearly show the movement of Russian soldiers in this area. Frankly, most cartographers now trying to update the maps have no idea how Russian troops got into this position. We drew the map update using the shortest possible route from the northwest of Toretsk towards Sherbinivka, but it's highly likely that Russian forces advanced along the Kryvyi Torets River or even entered from the south of Sherbinivka. A different mapping approach might have been more accurate. We are waiting for additional geolocated footage. The most important takeaway from this update is that the Russian army has begun moving on this front. The main objective now is to eliminate this small salient, the villages of Sherbinivka and Novospaska, along the line of Romanivka, Katarinivka, and the northwestern part of Toretsk. This red line marks the first objective for Russian troops. At this point, this section of the front has already been broken down into a smaller ring along the Kryvyi Torets River, around the Zabalki area and the remaining parts of Novospaska and Sherbinivka. The front line has shifted here. The advance has begun, indicating that the final phase of eliminating the entire pocket south of the Klebenbeek Reservoir is underway. Based on the news from Yablunivka and Sherbinivka, there is now a high likelihood that in 2 or maybe 3 weeks, the entire southern pocket will be cleared, and the Russian army will reach the southwestern outskirts of Kostiantinivka. Next, we move toward Dnipropetrovsk region. Here, the Russian army is actively advancing toward the village of Udakny. Very heavy fighting is expected here. Daily, new combat footage is released. This is how the map looked by the end of June 21st. Since June 21st, small updates have been made showing northward advances. Here's how the map looks by the end of June 22nd, a minor update. Today, more footage has emerged, very graphic, but it confirms the advance. We can see the Russian army moving from Novoserhivka and Novoalexandrivka toward the southwestern outskirts of Udakny, aiming to enter the forest belt, which could later be used to advance toward Molodetska and the railway. At the same time, we continue to see the deepening crisis for Ukrainian forces in the area of Zaporizhzhia, Yalta, and the rivers Mokry Torets, Mokry Yeli, and the Volchya River. Russian troops continue to apply pressure here. The situation with the pocket around northern Andriivka, Alexeyevka, and Zeleny Kut remains unclear. However, very interesting footage has emerged from this area today, previously unpublished. Most of the footage until now has been from Russian FPV drones. We've repeatedly noted that Ukraine has been actively withdrawing assets from this pocket, which were targeted by drone strikes. Today, the pattern has changed. The new footage primarily shows artillery strikes. Not just standard artillery, but multiple launch rocket systems. This indicates either an artillery preparation phase before a major assault on the pocket, or that Ukrainian forces have significantly increased their evacuation efforts toward Voplivka. Large groups of Ukrainian troops are now seen moving across open fields toward Novopavlivka, and these retreating forces are being hit by MLRS strikes. Based on these two videos, there's a high probability that the Russian army will soon completely cut off this corridor and reach the southern outskirts of Novopavlivka. Meanwhile, Russian troops continue advancing toward Yalta and Zirka. Very heavy fighting is taking place. Ukrainian forces are putting up fierce resistance, but Russia is using nearly every caliber available in its arsenal. One video shows the destruction of a Ukrainian dugout located on the outer edge of Yalta, a key forward defensive position that was simply wiped out. We expect to see the first footage from inside Yalta soon. There are also important updates from the Komar and Perebudova areas. Yesterday, Russian troops completed the clearing of Perebudova. Verified footage confirms this. The Russian army is now regrouping. Perebudova is located across the Mokra-Yala River. It's not an easy area for an immediate offensive. Proper infrastructure must first be prepared. So the pace here may slow down temporarily. However, once conditions are set, the Russian army is expected to advance further west toward the village of Myrna. While regrouping continues near Komar, Russian units are advancing toward Voskresenka. Heavy battles are also ongoing for the village of Shevchenko. Ukrainian forces are trying to reinforce this small village, but everything approaching its outskirts is being immediately destroyed by Russian FPV drones. Today, there has been additional Russian progress into the southern and central parts of Shevchenko. If we summarize all the map updates and verified footage, both neutral and pro-Russian, then by the evening of June 23rd, the Russian army controls about 50 to 60% of this village. There is also breaking news from the village of Malinivka. The Russian army has increased its fire strikes on Ukrainian positions in this small settlement. Over the past few days, Russian forces had been focusing on securing a firm foothold in the southeastern part. Now that the bridgehead is established, combat is gradually shifting to the central and northern sections. The latest footage shows a series of strikes on temporary deployments and forward positions of Ukrainian troops in Malinivka. There is a high likelihood that in the near future the Russian army will fully clear this village. That would allow Russian troops to reach the village of Poltavka, effectively striking at the rear of Ukrainian defending forces. Thank you for watching, stay informed, stay safe, and see you in the next update.